And there we go.
All right, thank you, Carolyn. So hi, everybody. Good afternoon. We'd like to welcome you all to our webinar, Designing and Implementing Effective Teamwork Assignments. My name is Jasmine Parent. I'm a learning technology consultant at Teaching and Learning Services. I'm here today with a colleague who's going to be co-hosting this webinar with me, Dr. Carolyn Samuel, who is an education developer at TLS.
Hi, everybody.
So just some very quick housekeeping notes. We want to let you know that this session is being recorded, and the recording will be posted on our website along with the slides from the presentation. I would also like to note that you're muted upon entry, but don't worry, we'll be setting aside some time at the end of the presentation to address some of your questions. So let's get started. So we have two outcomes for today. We hope that by the end of the webinar, you'll be able to describe key considerations when designing effective teamwork assignments and implement Peergrade to support peer assessment of teamwork. So let me start by asking you this question, which you can respond to in the chat. Why do you want students to work together in your course? I'm going to give you a few moments to just absorb that question, think about it, and then respond in the chat, and we can discuss some of your responses. Are the students primarily undergrads or grads? They can be either. So why would you want students to be working together? They have a lot to learn from each other. Collaboration is important for personal and career success. Yes, collaboration is also important to build community and make connections, especially in a remote learning environment. So students around in these times might feel disconnected from each other. So it's especially important to have them work together. Oh, wow, we have a lot of responses coming in. It's an important life skill. Yes, that is very true. So being able to work as a part of a team is a real world skill that we want students to develop. The ability to work effectively as a team requires guidance, practice, feedback, and more practice. So we can't always assume that students are going to know how to work in a team. It's important as an instructor, you give them this guidance for practice and feedback so students can develop these skills. Share perspectives, share experiences. Wow, a lot of really great answers. Manage instructors' workload is also a potential response for why you might want students to work together. But just a note on that, a well-designed teamwork assignment takes time to plan. So the work does tend to be before the assignment actually takes place rather than after. So it might save you time with grading, but it's important to put work into actually developing the assignment.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Jasmine. And in fact, there is a comment to that effect so that students can do more in-depth projects without resulting in an overwhelming amount to grade. So you're absolutely right that instructor workload is an important consideration. So we might save time at the end with the grading, but a lot of work does have to go into the planning.
Yes, exactly. So I'm going to hand it over to Carolyn if you have anything to add here. And for the next slide.
Well, I think I added my point there about the workload, so maybe we will go on to the next slide. And we felt it would be important to define a couple of terms before we get further into the content. And we often see reference to group work, and we see reference as well to teamwork. We don't view these as the same thing. So we'd like to explain what the difference is from our perspective, and this is how we're going to be using the terms during this session. So we imagine group work to be like a one-off. So you might have students in your class working together just in one class period, or maybe in 2 class periods, but essentially it's a one-off. In contrast, teamwork is sustained over a semester. So we have an arrow that goes across the semester, And the idea is that it refers to a group of students' intentional, sustained collaboration toward achieving a common goal over a period of time, such as a semester. So the key there is that it's sustained over a period of time to achieve that goal. And we even imagine that if this is done well, those skills and students' ability to work as a team will carry forward beyond the semester. So as they do their work in subsequent courses or even in the work environment, that those skills will transfer beyond the individual course. And there's a quotation that we wanted to share with you. So with a group, the whole is often equal to or less than the sum of its parts. And with a team, the whole is always greater. So again, there's that important distinction that the team implies something about how students are working together over an extended period. So we wanted to ask you something else. And again, we're going to ask you to pose your questions in the chat. So I'm going to open up my chat window again so I can see what you answered to this question, which is, what can be challenging about teamwork? Now, you might have done teamwork with your students. You might have had them do teamwork and noticed some challenges, but it's also possible that you have been involved in teamwork yourself and you might have experienced challenges. So just take a minute, type something into the chat. Jasmine, have you ever had challenges when doing teamwork?
I have.
Say a word about that.
I've absolutely had challenges. Yeah, so I see some of the responses coming in. It's common to say freeloaders, slackers, students who don't contribute. But I actually had a very interesting teamwork experience recently where it was almost the opposite, where students, we came together, we all had different backgrounds, and we were all almost trying to contribute, like overly contribute. And so our backgrounds and our experiences were kind of clashing with the understanding of the assignment itself. We didn't really have any sort of outline of instructions on how to work as a team. So it was not a great experience from a student perspective. So it's interesting to see that it can be, yes, problems with contribution, having students not contribute, but then it can also be the opposite, where you're kind of all trying to overwrite each other a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of that is coming through in the chat, things about poor communication, students dominating conversations, clash of personalities. Yeah, so a lot of similar things, different personalities, students don't always get along and then they complain to the professor. Yeah, okay, so all of these things can be problematic. Well, we'd like to suggest that these problems can be mitigated with effective assignment design. So let's go to this slide here. We were talking about challenges with teamwork, and the vast majority of dysfunctional student behaviors, for example, social loafing, which is something that was mentioned in the chat, where you have freeloaders, those are the social loafers, one or two members dominating the discussion, and complaints, for example, having to carry the dead wood, or the instructor isn't teaching. These are the result of bad assignments, not bad groups. So that's a quotation from Michelson, Knight, and Fink, who do a lot of work in the area of team-based learning. And we would like to believe that these challenges can be mitigated with proper assignment design or effective assignment design. So we're going to look at what that can look like. And we're going to go through some characteristics of well-designed teamwork assignments. So the first one is pretty obvious. Our link to course goals, that should sort of go without saying, that anything we do in our courses should be in support of students achieving the learning goals. Okay, so let's keep going. Are engaging. All right, well, to make something engaging, one thing that we would want to do is let students know why we are asking them to engage in teamwork. And we don't always do that. Sometimes we just give the assignment and say, here you go, now work together and do this. But if we tell students what the purpose is, students need to see the purpose of the assignment. They are likely to be more engaged, not quite there, Jasmine. They are likely to be more engaged. And to do that, one suggestion would be to perhaps assign a real world problem. So students like doing things with purpose. We all like to do things with purpose. And if we give them a task that involves a real world problem, there's a better chance that they're going to be engaged. Indeed, we want to have assignments that promote interaction and interdependence. So there has to be, of course, a reason for students to be working together as a team. That's our interdependence. If they can do the assignment independently, why would we have them work as a team? There is that workload matter, but still, there should be a pedagogical reason for having students work together as a team. And we need to include moments for interaction. We need not just include, but promote them. Students don't necessarily self-organize. We'd like to believe they would, but unfortunately they don't always self-organize. So we have to build that into the assignment. Okay, now we can keep going, Jasmine. We have to help students develop those teamwork skills. So very often we think that those like social skills and soft skills are going to develop naturally. They don't. Just as we teach academic skills, we need to teach students soft skills or social skills, things like leadership, decision making, trust building, communication and conflict management skills. I mean, we know that even for adults who are well past university, workshops exist on those topics because we do need to learn how to develop those skills. And that has to be built into the assignment. We can keep going. Something else, checkpoints, build in checkpoints. We would like to know how students are doing along the way. So there should be opportunities for students to check in with us and for us to check in with students to see how things are going. And there should also be feedback opportunities. Students need to have opportunities to give each other feedback on how things are going. And I can imagine that some of you have experienced situations where you get to the end of the course and all of a sudden students are like, this didn't work. We all got angry at each other and now we're in a mess. Don't want that to happen. Students need to learn to communicate with each other throughout the semester to tell each other how things are going. And the last one is providing individual and group accountability opportunities. That's kind of related to the feedback, but it can be a little bit more formal, but it's the idea that students have opportunities to assess each other, and the results have to be made available to the team, to each member of the team, to ascertain who needs more assistance, who needs more support, and who needs more encouragement with the learning. So this is really the area of focus for this session. We're going to look at how we can build in an opportunity for accountability in a very concrete way. And we'd like to propose a framework that will help with the implementation. And this framework is a 4-part framework. And we can have that on the screen there, a framework for fostering effective teamwork. It was proposed in 1965 by someone named Tuckman, and it has a really nice sound to it: forming, storming, norming, and performing. So 4 stages for effective teamwork. And I'm not going to go into tremendous detail with all of these just now, but I'll give you an overview. So forming is sort of the stage where students are new at working together with their teams, and they begin to orient themselves to what it means to work as part of a team, so to work interdependently. Storming is when students are sort of struggling with their interpersonal concerns. They might have some conflict, some disagreement about roles and responsibilities. And then we get to norming, which is where students are developing this greater cohesiveness as a team, and they're clarifying and adopting their agreed upon roles and responsibilities, and they're sort of comfortable with one another. Now, storming and norming can be iterative, so they can get comfortable, but then they can go back to storming when something else happens and there's a period of discomfort, and then it flows into norming again. So this is linear, but it's also iterative. And then we have that last stage, or last phase, I should say, of teamwork, where students are truly working in concert to achieve the goals. So to achieve those assignment goals. And performing also refers to students assessing their peers' contributions to achieving those goals. So having students assess their peers' contributions to teamwork as well as their behavior throughout the completion of the assignment. So adding this peer assessment to teamwork has the potential for fostering truly productive experiences in the team. And you might be wondering, oh, yes, thank you, Jasmine, for putting that up. Check out this TLS video. I would have forgotten that. So we have a really nice video, a helpful video that explains this framework in much more detail. And Jasmine, if you could put the link in the chat. Oh, you already did. Thank you. We recommend that you take a look at that brief video. I think it's like 3 or 4 minutes, and it goes into this framework in much more detail. Okay, so you might be wondering what this looks like in concrete terms. So how can peer assessment be integrated into teamwork? There are different kinds of criteria, assessment criteria that are possible. You could perhaps suggest they assess presence, which might be something like attendance at meetings, dependability. So that could be part of presence as well. Contributions, demonstrated quality of their work, the ideas they shared, the effort that they put into this. Perhaps team skills, and that might be something like cooperation, contributions to a trusting team environment, their ability, as I said before, to manage conflict or to set goals and work toward them, but all of this in the context of a team. And communication. So is it prompt? Is it consistent? Is it constructive? And don't think that students will necessarily be able to give each other constructive feedback without some guidance. So that's something that can also be built in. So I'm going to turn it over now to Jasmine, who's going to share with you a concrete implementation of peer assessment of teamwork. And again, this is a strategy that has the potential for mitigating a number of the challenges that were articulated previously. So Jasmine, over to you.
Thank you, Carolyn. So yes, as Carolyn said, now we're going to discuss how you can actually implement these strategies for teamwork assignments and peer assessment in your course. Before we talk about the tools that you can use for peer assessment of teamwork, I would just like to mention the tools that are available for students to use to collaborate in a teamwork assignment. So it's important to find collaborative tools that allow collaboration by other means other than just written text and being able to write to each other through email alone. And it's also important to consider options that offer fixed and flexible means of communication. So in reference to my courses, you can actually create your groups for your team assignments using the groups tool in my courses. You can manually create groups yourself, or you can set it so that students can actually enroll themselves into groups. You can then use these groups that you've created to set up an assignment space where students submit their work. So this is where only one member of the group needs to submit the assignment on behalf of the entire group. And you can also set up discussion forums where students can communicate with members within their group in a closed kind of restricted space. You can also use Microsoft Teams to foster student-to-student interaction. So Microsoft Teams is available through the Office 365 suite, and it's free for students to use. It allows them to create a team. They can add their peers, their team members. They can have conversations there. They can upload documents and be working on documents simultaneously. They can also chat and have virtual meetings.
So I think, Jasmine, I just want to interject there for a minute. you used the word conversation and you used the word chat, and I think it's important to clarify in our remote context that that can be text or it can be voice. So Microsoft Teams allows students to speak to one another with voice as well, and they can also be typing in the chat. I know that sometimes that's confusing for me, so I think it's something to make everybody aware of, that Teams has that flexibility, whereas My Courses is text-based.
Yes, exactly. So in My Courses discussion board, they can type to each other, they can post text to each other, but in Microsoft Teams, they can actually have like Zoom type meetings where they can have live conversations.
Real-time conversations.
Yes, yeah. And then there's also Zoom breakout rooms, which you may or may not be already familiar with, which can be used to facilitate group discussion in a live virtual setting. So this is similar to doing small group work or having small group type discussions in class. So what about peer assessment of teamwork? What technologies are available to support it? So today we're going to talk about one tool in particular, which is Peergrade. But before we dive in, I would just like to get a sense of who here has used Peergrade before. So I'm going to launch a Zoom poll, just asking you if you have any experience using Peergrade before in your course. I'll give you just a few seconds to respond. Okay, I have 23 out of 27. Okay, so if I end the poll, I'm going to share the results. I can see that most of you have not, but 5 of you actually have used Peergrade before. So that's just very helpful for me to know. So for those of you who have not used it before, Peergrade is a peer assessment tool that enables students to give constructive feedback to one another. Normally, instructors use it to have students assess the product of their peers' assignment. So for example, a student can submit an assignment like an essay for their peers to review anonymously. They review each other based on certain criteria that the instructor has given them, and then perhaps use that feedback that they've received from their peers to maybe modify or improve their essay, in which they can submit a final copy of for your evaluation. So that's just an example of how Peergrade is normally used. For peer assessment of teamwork, it's a little bit different. It can be used to assess the final product at the end. Oh, sorry, my poll just popped up again. At the end of an assignment, and then rather using it for students to assess certain peers' work within a whole class, it can be used for students to assess members within their group that they worked with for the assignment. So Peergrade is not, is in My Courses. It can be used through My Courses. You can access it through the content tabs. Just a note that it is not enabled in all courses by default. And so if you're looking for it and can't find it, that's totally normal if you haven't used it before. If you do want to have Peergrade enabled in your course, you can either let me or one of the other learning technology consultants at TLS know, and we'll put in the request for IT to enable it in your course.
Jasmine, is it accurate that instructors can write to IT support directly to request access?
We usually do it on behalf of the instructor. So I'd have to confirm if they can do it themselves, but I usually encourage instructors to ask us to do it. It might be quicker that way.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so once it's enabled in your course, you can then move forward with using it. To use it for peer assessment of teamwork, you must create an assignment following specific instructions, which we're going to share with you in an instructional step-by-step document, which we actually have posted on the web now. So Carolyn, if you have the link for that document, could you share it in the chat, please? We also have this document on our website where the webinar recording will be. So remember that as a part of a Peergrade assignment setup, you must create a feedback rubric for students to give feedback to each other. I'm going to be giving you an example of what a feedback rubric in Peergrade looks like very shortly. But before we look at that rubric, I'd like to give you just a high-level overview of what the process looks like for using Peergrade for peer assessment of teamwork. So I have a screenshot here of what the navigation bar looks like for students when they use Peergrade. So first, when students access the assignment, they will be given the assignment instructions that you've written for them. So here you might want to outline what your expectations for the assignment are, maybe remind them of netiquette practices, and give them some guidance on giving constructive feedback. Once they've reviewed the assignment instructions, they can then move on to the submission step. So here you can set a window of time where students are to submit something. So in the case of peer assessment of teamwork, regardless of if you're having them complete a mid-assignment evaluation or an end product evaluation, they're evaluating their peers' contributions or abilities to work in a team. So what they actually submit can vary at this stage. You can read more about this in our instructional guide. Once they've submitted something and the submission period has ended, the review or feedback period will open, in which students can then start evaluating each other using the rubric that you designed for them. And once the review and feedback period closes, students will then have an opportunity to react to the feedback that they received from their peers. So they can say whether the feedback was constructive or not, or they can also flag any problematic or inappropriate feedback that they may have received. Finally, students will be able to view a summary of their feedback and reactions to the feedback that they gave under the review tab. Instructions will also have the ability to review the feedback and feedback scores that, that students gave each other. So I also wanted to give you an example of what a rubric looks like in Peergrade. So I have a screenshot here of a few criteria that you can consider using. I've adapted the example from Appendix A of our resource document for peer assessment of teamwork, which Carolyn will share in the chat. For this particular rubric, I have a heading for a section which says the team member, followed by various criteria in which students can rate their peers using a scale. In this example, they only select from a scale, but keep in mind you can also create questions that have a scale and a comment or feedback box for written comments so that they can elaborate why they perhaps chose a certain response. You can also have comment only type questions. Do you have anything to add to this part, Carolyn?
No, I think we're good. I'm just getting that link to the appendix, to Appendix A, and I'm putting that in the chat now.
Perfect, thank you. So I have a question for you. Should peer assessment count towards a student grade? So I have a second poll here that I'm going to launch. And it's just a basic yes or no question, what you think.
I'm really curious about this one.
Me too, I'm not really sure what to expect. Okay. Just give it a few more seconds. Okay, I'm going to end the poll now and share the results. So 70% of you said yes, peer assessment should count towards a student's grade, and 30% of you said no. So let me stop sharing the results. So my answer to this question is it depends. So some things you must consider. You really must think about the goals of the assignment that you decided on in the planning process. So the decision on whether the decision that you make on whether or not peer assessment counts towards the student's grade should really depend on these goals. You may also consider the timing of the peer assessment. So peer assessment can take place during two phases of a teamwork assignment. It can take place early or midway through an assignment. So as you can see here during the storming and norming phase, In this case, it typically aims to let students know how they're doing and gives them a chance to learn and improve. In this case, peer assessment does not need to be graded. Peer assessment can also take place towards the end of an assignment. So this typically aims to let students know on how they performed. This type of peer assessment can include a grade that is integrated with their final grade of the assignment, though it doesn't have to. In my experience, I've actually done assignments that have included both types of peer assessment, ones that have been midway through the assignment and ones that have been at the end. If you do want to factor peer assessment into a student's final grade, we do have a resource available for you to help you do that. So on our TLS website, under the peer assessment page, which Carolyn will share with you in the chat, we have an Excel spreadsheet which includes a calculation table. So if you just scroll down on that page, you can see here peer assessment and grading, and the link to the spreadsheet is there. It includes a calculation table that you can use to factor in peer assessment scores. So it does the calculations for you essentially. We also have a companion video that is linked right underneath the spreadsheet on the same site, which is a companion tutorial video, which we're also going to share with you, which shows you how to use that Excel spreadsheet.
So both links are now in the chat.
Perfect.
So Jasmine, sorry, just before you go on, I'd like to reiterate the importance of what you said, that students need practice, and practice doesn't always have to be graded. But it does make sense that there be some kind of grade at the end, because that's what's going to promote that accountability. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't have to be a huge amount.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So let's move on to discussing the key takeaways that we've outlined today. And we're going to hear from you. So before we do hear from you, just wanted to mention that we talked about characteristics of well-designed teamwork assignments, which, for example, that include having the assignment linked to the course goals and having it help students develop important real-world skills. We also gave you ideas on how you can use a tool like Peergrade to implement peer assessment of teamwork. But now I would like to hear your thoughts on what the most important takeaways from today's session you felt were most important.
And Jasmine, would you like to unmute the participants? So you have the choice of typing in the chat, and if you prefer, you can put up your hand and we can call on you if you'd like to speak. This is that awkward moment, like in a classroom when one asks a question and then everybody's quiet.
Yes, and it always seems more awkward online when you're in Zoom for some reason. In class, people are chatting and thinking, and you can see their faces, but
That's true. We can't see people thinking right now. Okay, so we have one response here, peer assessment and having to help students organize with their teamwork. Finally, I get to do it to someone else. Yeah. Julie, maybe you'd like to say a little bit more about that. And please feel free to put up your hands if you prefer speaking. We're happy to hear from you. Oh, just the silence bit. Okay. This is also a way for instructors or facilitators to get feedback from participants. So we are able to do a summary, we are able to do a wrap up, we're able to tell you what we believe the most important things are, but it's a way for us also to get feedback from you to get a sense of, did you think any of this was worthwhile? And if you did, what really stood out for you? Is there something that you hadn't thought of before that you would like to try implementing? Okay, so we do have another comment. Yeah, a few things are coming in now.
I'm curious to know about what people think about using peer assessment for teamwork in a remote setting. So the important, or sorry, not just peer assessment of teamwork, but teamwork in general in a remote setting, because students are so isolated now and they're learning at home by themselves. Having teamwork assignments is really important and a way to connect people. I've taken a few online courses, and you know, if we didn't have any teamwork assignments, I would have never had the opportunity of getting to know my classmates. So I think it's something to think about for the context that we're in as well.
Yeah, and I think I just wanted to comment on something that came in through the chat too, that My Courses is only text. So it's true that we did say that students will communicate with each other through text in My Courses, and maybe we should clarify that. My Courses does allow for multimedia. So students can upload audio recordings, they can upload video recordings, they can upload graphics, images. So it doesn't have to be only text, but My Courses does not allow for real-time chat the way we can do real-time chat in Zoom as we are doing now, or as one can do in MS Teams. So My Courses is not actually limited to text, but it is something that happens in flexible time.
Mm-hmm.
And there was another comment that was made about a possible barrier for instructors, that allowing students to engage with teamwork might be like losing control, you know, giving students the control. It doesn't have to be that. Again, the idea is that the assignment be very, very well structured so that students can really learn from it, and that they don't go off in various directions and doing their old thing, and you know, that there is loss of control at every level. So the key would be structuring the assignment well, taking into consideration the characteristics we described earlier, so that there is control of that assignment.
There are some comments concerning Microsoft Teams.
Yeah, maybe you want to address that. Recommendations for encouraging groups to use MS Teams. I have some ideas, but maybe Jasmine, if you want to.
Go ahead. It might spark some thought.
Okay. Well, I think for me, the most obvious one would be allowing students a practice opportunity. So MS Teams certainly was new for me prior to the pandemic. I mean, I'd used it a little bit, but it took me a while to become comfortable using it. And I would say that holds for students too. If they haven't used the tool, they might benefit from some practice opportunities that involve no stakes, so nothing graded, but allow them the opportunity to meet their peers in teams. You can give them a task. It can be like a get to know you task or an icebreaker task, but something more than just say hello to everybody, but actually try to do something in teams so that they get the hang of it. And once they get the hang of it, there's a good chance they'll be more disposed to using it. So that's just one suggestion.
Mm-hmm. And it's an option for a tool for collaboration as well. Like they don't have to use it. It's just there and it's available to them and free because it's offered by McGill. So they could use other tools that they're more familiar with and comfortable with. But Teams is just something that we do offer. So, and it does have a lot of features. So it's quite nice if they do choose to use it.
There are some great questions coming in through the chat. So like, I'm just looking through here. Would you recommend forming the teams randomly or letting students choose their own teams? So, you know, this is the kind of thing, if I had $1 for a dime, even for every time somebody asked that question, I think I'd be rich. So it's a great question. And the answer is, it depends. It depends on the goals of the assignment. I put something in the chat earlier about the size of the group, and it was an example of why you might want a larger group rather than a smaller group, but the same would hold for how you form the groups. Is there any benefit to having homogeneous groups or not? So those are considerations that instructors should take into account, and none of this should happen just like without that intentional piece of like, well, why would I form the groups, or why would I let students choose their own? So you should have a rationale for the choices that you make. And then there's a comment here, not a question, about rubrics for peer evaluation. Yes, there are many, many examples in that appendix that I put in the chat earlier. And for all of you, if you would like to talk through your assignment and discuss what might be suitable, of course, TLS is available for individual consultations. So we're happy to meet with instructors and talk about the implementation of Peergrade and also what kind of rubrics would be suitable for the assignment that you would like to have your students do. There isn't a one size fits all.
There's a question about time zones, which tool is optimal? So if you have students in different time zones, you would ideally want to have a tool that has flexible communication capability. So if students are unable to meet in a live kind of session, like on Zoom, because the time zones vary so greatly, you'll want to give them opportunities to be able to leave messages for each other. So whether it's on a discussion board or through something like Microsoft Teams, where they can essentially chat and leave each other messages, that's something you'll definitely want to consider. It's interesting you say that, because going back to the experience that I mentioned before with the team experience that didn't work very well, we were all in different time zones. And I think one of the problems was too, like different time zones, one of our members was in China, somewhere in Vancouver, somewhere here, was not communicating, setting up like a good communication channel where we all understood the goals of the assignment and our roles. So it's just something to keep in mind. Time zone is very important and can have a big impact on how the group or the assignment goes for a team.
Exactly. Yeah. So we still have a few minutes. We've got 3 more minutes. If there are any last questions, we're happy to respond.
I was just going to say, I think at least the person who mentioned before about letting go of control, at least my sense, I'm not sure if the person who posted it had the same view, but the worry is less about letting go of control in terms of them doing group projects, but more the peer feedback, and the worry that, given some of the feedback, I've done a peer assessment that's been confidential and just goes to me, and knowing how harsh sometimes students can be to each other, whether that can end up spiraling out of control. It's obviously, even if it's somewhat anonymous, if it's a small group, it's going to be pretty easy for students to know who said what and that kind of thing. And I think there's a fear that can spiral out of control.
Yeah, it's a legitimate concern. And I think that's why it is so important to teach students to give constructive feedback. And that's why, as we've said throughout the session, there have to be opportunities for practice and feedback. And that means practice giving feedback as well, and understanding what is appropriate, what's not appropriate, and we need instructional materials for that. And those things exist, and we've put some of the resources in the chat, and would encourage you to, not you, but you collectively, to take a look at some of those resources that give ideas. But indeed, students need to learn how to give each other feedback. And maybe, Jasmine, did you want to comment on the flagging in Peergrade?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, so that whole phase where students have the ability in Peergrade to review the feedback that they received is an important phase, because at that point they can flag if there are comments that are inappropriate. They can flag them to the instructor, but they can also give feedback back to the students who gave them feedback and say whether or not it was constructive. So this is for peer assessment of teamwork particularly. Like, they will know who they are assessing because it's within their group, but that phase is important so that students know that their peers that they're assessing will also be, in some sense, assessing them back on their ability to give feedback.
But that takes practice. We can't spring that on students and say, now assess your peers. They need to do a practice run with that, and they need to do that with guidance from the instructor. So it is 12:45. We are going to close our session. I'm just putting one more link in the chat. This is the link to the TLS webinars page, and we will be posting a PDF of the slides shortly after this session, and we will post the video recording as well. There will be a list of the resources, references and resources posted, and we hope you'll take a look at them, and we hope you'll consider implementing some effective teamwork assignments in your courses. So thank you very much for joining us today, and please check the TLS events page for other upcoming webinars. We have our regular Friday series, and then we do have some others that will be coming up. So thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Have a great day.